My speech in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, before I go into the debate, let me just say so I'm going to begin with my characterization of what the services look like in the first place, what does the firm or the place likely to look like that enact this kind of things, what's our policy on it, and what's the problem with all this, right? Okay, so first of all, the type of service this can be applied to are, well, there are two types, which is inelastic good and elastic good, right? Inelastic goods are things like flight, things like medicine, things like baby food, things that you're absolutely necessary in life, you cannot lack, right? And then we have things like inelastic good, right? Things like maybe food, things like fast food or additional things, maybe things like tourism, for example, right? So going into this, right? So what does the firm exactly look like? So we're talking about company, most likely going to be bigger company that are taking data from people, right? Things like health information, for example, that are available on social media. Maybe you have not agreed fully for it to be taken and sold and trade between companies, but yet they still take it anyway. Maybe you accidentally post hey, well, I'm 51 right now, and then they can do the demographic of oh, people who are 51 are most likely to do this, and we can probably gauge the price and sell this to him through advertisement, things like that, right? Right, so yeah, it's things like gender, weight, and height, right? So yeah, like I said, you might not knowingly giving it to them, and they just sell your data to different companies, and yeah, and more in collusion with other companies in on itself, right? So what's wrong with price gouging? Because price gouging hurts people no matter who it is applied to, right? And it's more likely to be applied to people who are vulnerable in the first place, because those type of people are the people who have no alternatives, right? To things that they might be able to buy. So things like inelastic goods, right? Things like flight, oh, I have to go on a conference and I really need this flight. Or I really need food for my baby, for example. And then it's unlikely to be prey on normal people because they have other means to go to. If you price gouge your things too much, so for example, you make the service too expensive, they can just go to another place, right? So this is impacting the vulnerable people more, right? Okay, so going into the policy, right? So the ban on personalized pricing are going to be enacted on every companies, right? You have to have fixed price for everyone. So that's not mean that oh, you cannot change the price later on, but the price has to be applied to everyone in general. So we're not limiting their changes in accordance to the economy, right? So the way that the policy is going to go is we're going to increase transparency within the companies, right? So things pricing can be shown from different products, things like informed consent to the average viewer. That's oh yeah, so this is what we decided to do, and wait, sorry, pause. Yeah, so you're okay, all right, sorry. Yeah, you're basically saying to the people that oh, this is what we put into it, this is the good that goes into it, this is why the price is like this, and it's going to be applied to everyone. So that's how we're going to do our policy. And the fact that this policy kind of pay for itself in that it pays people back, because this inherent personalized price gouging is harming the people, right? So for example, if people miss the flight, if people don't have aspirin because it's simply too expensive because the company decided that you know what, we're gonna raise the price for you, then that hurts the economy and hurts the people, right? Because by enacting this policy on itself, we are preventing harm before it happens. So we are preventing people from hey, I cannot simply afford this because the company keep raising the price for us, or I cannot contribute back to the economy because I simply do not have the means to. And also this is also impacting the society, where it's hey, certain people are expected to pay more even though they not know about it, and that is simply unfair, right? All right, okay, so what's wrong with society? So in the company in on itself have the incentive to do these type of things, right? They have both the incentive and the capacity to do this type of thing for the people, because well, we all know companies' incentive are mostly money related, right? What can they do to get them the most money? So price gouging come into play, and then things like capacity, right? So because they are providing things like social service, some of them are absolutely necessary, so they can do things like price gouging and stuff. And they are most likely to have a good lawyer or have a good legal team to fall back on. So when people are like, hey, I'm gonna sue you for like increasing the price based on my gender, my health, or my things, they're still like, hey, I have a good lawyer and I can like do to rebut that, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go into my substantive part, right? So number one, people have the rights to privacy in general, because like the ability to do personalized pricing in the first place means you need to have information from the people, right? So like number one, like I said, it's not informed consent, right? You're like, the people got unknowingly increase the price for themselves just by existing in general, right? Because they keep trading your data and stuff. And then number two, like, yeah, the companies are using it to do harm, so that is inherently bad for the people and like morally, right? And okay, number two on that, regulation is not enough in the current status quo, right? Because like, what can they do to go by the regulation of like, oh, like the price should be around this part? What they can do to go around the regulation is like citing things like, oh, it's being things that are highly technical that people normally don't understand, where it's like, oh yeah, so say that certain thing are absolutely necessity, even though it might not be, or like highly make it like, oh, for example, like on flight like that, where it's like, oh, that's like, oh, by shifting this thing around, I need to increase the price for you, even though it might not be necessary, and normal people wouldn't understand because they have not worked within the company or understand how the company works before. And they also have plausible deniability, where it was like, oh yeah, it's like the things are expensive, and that's why we're doing this, right? So right, and so our point, like our policy is likely to be done well because like it has a lot of political capitals. For example, like it affects everyone in both long term and short terms, right? For example, people who are like got diabetes or something like that, right? So if the price is insulin is raised for them, it means that like they can damage their livelihood. It means that like, oh, if it makes their life harder, it's probably mean that they can't really work. And if they can't really work, they can't really contribute to the economy. They don't have enough money to pay for themselves or to put more into the economy on itself. So by hurting the little people, you're hurting like the economy in the long term, and this is why it's beneficial for us to do it. And yeah, and that goes into my third substantive, which is like, oh, it's harming the people, right? On the basis of like just fairness in the first place. Everyone should, like regardless of where they come from or what they do, should pay for things equally, right? So because like regardless of their circumstances, you should be treated the same, because like genuinely we want to make the people's lives better. Companies want to have like a good relationship with the people, which means that like, oh, if companies start to have increased transparency, you can pretty much be like, hey, our company have more transparency than this one, and this one is probably like price gouging you or something like that. So if companies start to adopt these type of things and be like, hey, our company actually show everything to you, it's more likely to make people go to their company instead of the rival companies, and it's also like protection of people and rights to be treated the same. And that is my speech. Thank you.
Students are dependent on being able to access things such as books, food, rent. But the biggest barrier is that they lack the income to support themselves. This is far worse, especially for marginalized and underprivileged people from low socioeconomic backgrounds who do not have the financial support. But the biggest reason why they were able to survive is due to the cheaper price due to student discounts, such as Apple education programs that give discounts to electronic devices that students buy, such as bookstores that give discounts to people to buy books. Our case is simple. We're going to prove why personalized pricing is necessary for underprivileged people, and is the reason they are able to access these goods much more easier. First in setup, how does the personalized pricing system works? Firstly, it's going to change the price based on the necessity, which looks like for certain people who need these services, we are able to give them cheaper prices for them to access, such as like poor people, students, or even loyal customers. But secondly, if we believe the person should not be able to access that certain good because it could cause potential harm, it looks like hiking up prices for people who have like addictions, such as like alcoholic addictions that count like that they have committed offenses before, and therefore it'll be much more detrimental if they access these alcoholic goods. Note that these things are at the discretion of the company, which means if the company feels like they want to impose or increase the price, then they're able to do it. But if not, at least we give them the choice to do so. This is a tool in the toolbox for them to use if a certain company wants to use it as a marketing strategy. But second piece of setup, how do we get information on the people? Because obviously, we're not in support of like breach of data or even stealing data. Because firstly, these are public data that everyone can access. This looks like how offenders who committed offenses like DUIs, the records are there and it's publicized, which means these companies can get those information. But secondly, it can also act as a requirement, which means before they give the personalized pricing for each individual, the person has to like give a form of like information to them, such as like student cards, veteran cards, or even disabled cards, for them to access that price in the first place. But thirdly, sometimes you have registered your personalized data to the company, and the company will use that personalized data, such as like for instance of like loyal customers in like H&M brands who you can register and give your data and then giving you discounts. This debate cannot be about stealing data like they claim, because obviously there's regulations on breach of data, and in order for you to even set personalized pricing, you need to have justifications for how exactly you want to like set those personalized pricing. It isn't just going to be like a crime where every single company is just going to steal data from individuals on the ground. They need to actually prove how there isn't regulations. A broad response then. Firstly, on the system, because this personalized pricing isn't about setting a price for every single individual on the same amount of price from a person-to-person basis. This personalized pricing is based on specific groups in need and how exactly we cater to those specific groups. But secondly, AF claims that these companies will hike up prices of the goods. This doesn't make sense because companies care more about the volume of customers that they can get, which means if they trade off some form of money that they are able to actually trade off, they get much more customers or consumers actually coming in, and the amount of profit will increase if they have much more customers actually going to like store or company if they're able to give a discount to individuals, and that means they have much more profit, right? First argument then, why it increases accessibility, especially for people in need. The framing here is simple. App has to prove that from that firms have to impose like the same price for every single person regardless of these circumstances. What we are going to prove is that people don't have the financial capacity, some people don't have the financial capacity to access these goods, and we provide a form of access. First layer of analysis. Who are the groups of people in need and why are they in need in the first place, right? These are the students, the low-income individuals, the people who actually like people like the veterans or even the disabled. And all the similarities of these groups is that these people have limited financial capacity. They need the lower prices in order for them to buy the goods or even survive. Why exactly are they in need of financial capacity? A couple of reasons. The first is that there's a huge barrier for them to get the income in the first place. These are the students or the disabled or the veterans who are more likely cannot work because students, they need to focus on their university or even their education, and because the disabled people are physically incapable of working, or this means they rely on the other sources of income that they have, for example, their family support, for example, the financial aid from the state, and which is very limited in nature, which means the ability for them to buy stuff is contingent upon the aid that they have at the very first place, right? The second reason is because these people have like high expenses that is necessary for them. For example, the poor people, they need to feed their family, the students need to pay for books and rent, and the disabled people, they need to pay for meds and equipment, which means more often than not, they have extremely high amount of spending under their side, right? The third reason then is the ability for them to get like more income is extremely limited because some of these people, while they may be able to work, but their wages are very, very low. For example, the poor people, they are working under minimum wages. For example, the students, they can only work at part-time jobs and get a limited amount of income. All these groups of people, they don't have the capacity to sustain themselves fully. The conclusion here is, all of these people on app are unable to access these forms of goods because of those barriers that exist. The comparative on our side is that these groups are able to access these products at a cheaper price without trading off other forms of expenses. Why exactly access to products are extremely necessary? Because firstly, you're able to protect your quality of life. Because imagine a disabled person who can't buy food because they have to trade off to spend money for their meds. Or a student can't buy books because they trade off paying for their rent, which is extremely expensive. All of these harms their quality of life to a point where they're suffering because they can't access some form of a necessity to sustain themselves. Second thing is, it's removing the ability for them to improve their quality of life. Because now, students and poor people need more money to survive, which means they aren't able to actually access this, right? Second argument then, why exactly it creates a high barrier for people who have problems? because there are so many things that we increase the price for people to not access. For example, like alcohol problems, like cigarette addiction, like sugar. All of these things cause multiple harms. For example, if you are an alcoholic, or secondly, if you're addicted to smoking, or thirdly, if you're obese because you consume too much sugar. So, because these products are highly accessible, right? Note that it's very hard for us or a company to increase the price on sugar, because so many other companies, they rely on like sugar, like bakeries or even other forms of like food services, right? Which means that if you increase the price, it is going to harm so many companies or even so many businesses. But if you don't, if you decrease the price, so many problems can also happen to people on the ground, which means how exactly are we able to cater this under our side? How do we decrease the problem? Firstly, now certain groups of people cannot buy these items because we don't want to exacerbate the harms of them accessing this problem. Why is preventing this harm so important? Because firstly, cheaper pricing allows them to because cheaper pricing in absence of this personalized pricing will allow them to fall into addiction easily. Now, because we make them expensive and we mark out the prices, they have to contemplate whether or not they want to buy it because they have other forms of necessities that they have to pay. But secondly, the higher price will make it less accessible to them, which means they won't be able to actually access these forms of things that make them addicted in the first place, right? What are the harms then if we don't put this form of personalized pricing? Because understand that if you are able to access, like for instance, alcohol at a very cheap price, it means addiction will make you depend on the alcohol for the rest of your life and make you fall into a form of dependency on this alcohol, and will make you will make you harm based on your condition if you are dependent on alcohol. But secondly, if you're dependent on sugar, then you have diabetes. Then you have to depend on medicine like insulin if you get diabetes, which means it'll exacerbate your condition of the amount of money that you have to spend, because insulin is extremely expensive and you have to spend increase the amount of spending in the future. This means all of these harms prove to you that personalized pricing is necessary for individuals who are suffering under the ground, never been prouder, neck.
Fairness shouldn't be at the cost of equity. Just because Ihsan is more richer than me does not mean that he deserves to go Australs more than me. The reality is that the scholarship helps people to be able to access things that are necessary for them. Rich students does not mean that they actually deserve education more just because they have more money to access it. The reality is poor students also deserve to be able to access education because it's important for them, because it's the only way for them to be able to uplift themselves and to be able to escape the poverty cycle. This is the thing that comes from first that do not engage, that was not engaged by the second speaker of Affirmative, which means that they have to lose this bit. I want to point out, they just claim to us that, well, the benefit is just going to be marginal. I want to point out two things. First, that's not true. The benefit is actually very huge. Things such as laptops are very, very expensive, where you have to spend at least hundreds of US dollars in order for you to be able to access it to begin with. Which means that if you have discounts, you're able to actually reduce the amount of money that you have to spend in order for you to buy this laptop, in order for you to, for example, buy more food, or pay your rent, or buy books for yourself, which means that you're able to protect yourself far better. But maybe they're right, that it's not going to be that huge. The reality is that even if it's not that huge, the small amount is already enough to actually accumulate to a bigger impact. So for example, currently I'm surviving on the students' prices for food. For example, instead of paying 10 ringgit for my food, every single day I pay 5 ringgit for my food, which means that I'm able to, by the end of the month, save at the very least around 200 to 300 ringgit, which I can use to pay my rent. This is a huge benefit for myself, because at that side of the house, I'm unlikely to actually be able to pay my rent, which means that I have to take up part-time, which means that I have to which means I have to stress out myself every single day thinking about that I have to study, I have to go to work, and I have to actually pay my rent. All of these things harms the ability for the life of the students, but more importantly, not even just students, the poor people, the disabled people, the veterans who no longer have sustainable income, which means that they are unable to actually live their life properly. This is a huge impact in this debate that already wins this debate outright. Firstly, I want to argue that why exactly data stealing is not really part of the debate. I just want to first point out the biggest problem I have with this affirmative teams is that for some reason they suggest to us that at the point where you are actually having a personalized price, therefore that a lot of these companies are going to steal all of your data. First, we explained to you that in terms of regulation already exists to ban you, to prevent you from actually stealing all of this data to begin with. But second, and more importantly, even if it's not true that the regulation do not work, it is unclear to me how exactly they are able to prevent all of these companies to actually steal this data, simply because of the fact that companies steal data not because of just to have personalized pricing, but also because of other things that benefits them, things such as like ads, for example, things such as like, I don't know, like knowing about people and stuff like that. Which means that on both sides of the house, there is no probability of us proving that the data will not be stolen, which means that we have to operate on the assumption that there might be companies who will steal some data and there might be companies who are not going to steal your data. The reality is that both teams cannot actually resolve this problem. Therefore, data stealing is not really part of the debate. What is actually then the most important part of the debate? Firstly then, it's about how exactly companies will be affected by this. I want to first explain to you why exactly companies still have the incentive to actually reduce their prices in order to make it accessible, because this is the biggest contention coming from that side of the house. I have 3 layers of reasons for this. Firstly, it's the competition that exists. So for example, if one company only have like very high prices for a lot of like people or like all their consumer, the other companies can simply reduce their price in order to create a comparative advantage, in order for them to attract as much consumer as possible into their companies and steal all of their consumer from the other companies. Which means this creates a race to the bottom in order to reduce as much price as possible, but more importantly, it creates more like loyal customer or like certain groups of customer. So for example, a poor person will most likely going to go to company B because they are prioritizing the company itself. Why exactly they will do this? Because at the very least, even at the very least, getting lesser money is much better than not getting any money whatsoever, because you do not get another consumer. But secondly, it's the fact that there's already some form of like ESG and also reputation that they can build around this. A lot of companies try to pride themselves as somebody who are helping the vulnerable, helping the poor people, helping the disabled people. This is why Apple, a big company, decided to have Apple like student discounts, because they want to show that they are actually care about education, they actually care about the poor people, which means that they're able to actually promote themselves as somebody who actually like cares about the society. But thirdly, it's the fact that we explain to you how exactly the demand on also supply works. The response that they get to us is just to accuse us of not understanding accounting. Number one, there's actually economy, but number two, the way the supplies and demand works is that obviously if you increases the amount of price, you will also lose the consumer, simply because of the fact that the consumer who originally can pay for certain price at a certain price can no longer pay at that price, which means they're going to drop out from paying for you. At least on our side of the house, even if you reduces the prices for certain people, at least you are able to increase the amount of consumer, even if you lose the amount of demand, even if you lose certain amount of money. Which means in terms of like the companies, they are more likely going to actually like try to reduce the prices. But at this point of the debate, it is clear that there's a possibility of like the companies will reduce their price. There are also possibility of like the company will try to price gouge, engaging with their best case scenario. Why exactly that even if the company wants to price gouge, it is unlikely for them to resolve this problem? I want to point out, their argument about price gouging is based on the idea of inelastic goods. The problem here is that even if you make it equal to everyone, I'm not entirely sure why exactly the prices will go down. Because now what's likely going to happen is that the prices will be very, very expensive for every single person, because it is inelastic, which means that even if you are charged very, very high, people will still have to buy it. So for example, insulin is very expensive. They will actually continuously increase the price because people will still buy it regardless on that side of the house, which means they cannot actually change the system anyways. But I want to point out why exactly that we are able to actually reduce the price for inelastic goods on our side of the house. The first reason is because it creates a stability for the companies. I want to point out that a lot of the goods such as insulins are very, very expensive. That is why companies also try to charge very high to begin with. Not because like they are profit motivated, but the cost itself is very expensive. How exactly that they're able to actually cater to the poor people? Because now when they charge the rich people a bit more expensive, but they reduce the price for the poor people, now they're able to actually create stability when it comes to the money itself. Because they can use the money that the extra money that they get from the richer people that they know who can actually pay all these insulin prices to actually compensate for like the money that they lost from like the poor people who actually needed this insulin. This is how they're able to actually sustain their company itself, because they're able to ensure that people are able to access insulin while at the same time not being able to actually do not have to pay at a very extremely high price that they cannot pay. But secondly, I want to point out the stability of the companies are also dependent on this. This is where I engage with their flight analysis. Because the reality is that things such as flights are very unpredictable, which is to say that a lot of people, we do not know when exactly people are going to actually book a flight. We do not know how many people are going to actually take on a specific flight. The problem is that every single company cannot simply just gamble their money and spend thousands of dollars in order to actually pay all the fuel in order to fly their flights, which means that they have to ensure that people book it earlier, so that way that they're able to estimate whether or not they have to change what the flight time itself. This is very important because when you make it cheaper for people to book earlier, that means that you're able to secure your consumer and demand earlier as possible. That means that you reduces the unpredictability or the waste of money in the future where people suddenly do not actually book or like they book very late. This means that you are able to create stability of the company far better at the point where you're able to change the time because you incentivize people to actually book earlier and to actually secure the seat in the company far better. Finally then, I want to note, their argument is that let's just rely on the welfare of the government and that's actually good because like governments are better. The problem here is that right now we only rely on the government. What's likely going to happen on that side of the house, as we explained, because a lot of people are not able to access all of this welfare or all of this food, that means that the government have to spend even more money to actually be able to help them to be able to access all these things. That means that they have to give more food stamps, more money, more subsidies in order for them to be able to access this. This is a huge burden to the government, which means that the government has to sacrifice other things as well in terms of like the welfare and the development. This is very harmful for the government. For all those reasons, it is clear negative.
We're gonna begin in 3, 2, 1. Panel. So what side negative has done this entire debate is they've completely gone on a parallel route of what we have gone on our model. Like our model has been about like how companies will like target prices to specific people, not just groups of people, but they completely said that that's not true. It's going to be only groups of people. So what we've tried to say on our side is we're talking about like flight prices increasing every time you refresh the page, or we're talking about hotels where if suppose you're booking a hotel on Agoda and you refresh the page and the price has gone up in just 2 seconds. That's the type of pricing we're talking about, and those are usually catered to places where it's more inelastic demand, where you need that hotel no matter what, you need that flight no matter what, because there's no alternatives, there's few alternatives. They keep talking about Apple and Apple and Apple and about how Apple has student discounts and stuff. There are so many brands of laptops other than Apple that you can choose from, and Apple is the most elastic demand company that I know because of the fact that you can literally, if you're poor, which company why would you buy a MacBook if you are poor? Like, if you are poor, you would decide to go and buy a cheaper Windows laptop or go and buy a second-hand laptop. There is the entire second-hand market that the side negative has failed to even comprehend, which is the fact that when there is elastic demand, there is second-hand products. But with inelastic demand, such as buying food, buying flights, buying hotels, there's no second-hand hotels, second-hand flights. You have no choice but to book those things. That is why they are inelastic. If there's any products that where the second-hand market comes into play, those products are not in this debate. That's what we have, and as government, we have fiat to determine this, and we have already determined. We have already come up with a model from the start. But just to engage with them, because they've completely failed to engage with us throughout our entire first speaker and second speaker, I will try my best to engage with them, which is even if we do the Apple example and we say that, okay, Apple offers student discounts, right? Okay, they might offer discounts to certain people, but the discounts aren't that big. They're just 5%, 10%. So if you can't afford that, if you couldn't afford that MacBook, that is just a play for the company to give you false advertising in a way where like that is like the perfect marketing strategy, right? Oh, my laptop costs 50,000. Okay, baht, whatever currency. Okay, it costs $2,000, right? But now, oh my God, you can buy for $1,800. That is still $1,800. If that was priced at $1,800 from the start, poor people would never even think to touch it. It's just a marketing ploy to make poor people poorer and make rich people richer, make the companies richer, making the poor people poorer. And that's what you guys are catering to on the negative side, is to try and steal poor people of more of their money instead of choosing to go in alternative routes where we have fixed pricing, right? If we, instead of doing personalized pricing, we have fixed pricing, and now consumers have more knowledge, they have more information, and they have more free will and choice to determine what products they buy. That is what my first speaker and my second speaker has gone on and on about. Now, if we have free will to determine what products we buy, like I said, you'll most likely, if you're poorer, go to the second-hand market, and if you're rich and you can afford that MacBook for that price, then you will go to that price. Now, we're not talking about coupons. If you have a coupon, that's not in this debate. Like, if you have a coupon to buy a MacBook, that's basically the same as cash. So you cannot use that as a counter or a rebuttal like you guys have tried to do either. So now if we go on to the other examples that they have mentioned, such as like if they're talking about like how drug addiction and alcohol. I don't know about personalized pricing for alcohol. I did not know that alcohol can one day be like $50 and another day be like $52 and another day go back to 48. That's not how it works. So I don't understand where the drugs come into play, where, oh, there's personalized pricing. There's no like student discount for alcohol. If there is, please tell me. I'm gonna need it after this round. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that entire example is also out of this debate. Now, let's go on to the important things, right? What your side does is they only help the people that are ultimately going to be profitable, right? Your side's only helping the people who are going to give them money, like the most amount of money, maybe by tricking them into into reducing the price a bit. They're still going to get a huge profit or margin. And meanwhile, the people with chronic illnesses, they completely like are unhelped by you guys because of the fact that if suppose a company sees that this person really needs insulin, they're gonna jack up the prices, right? They're gonna jack up the prices for that specific person because of the fact that there is data online. We live in a world full of data, big data, right? So what do we need? Every single company has access to data, and that is more valuable than gold right now. So if we talk about data being used against people, most likely companies, what are they going to do? Like, what is the more likely option? Are they going to use it to help the people, or are they going to use it to benefit, right? You talked about how if they have fixed prices for insulin, they're just going to make it high for everybody. But I feel like that's not true because of the fact that that's where competition comes in. Where if suppose there's more than one insulin manufacturer, they're going to compete to get the lowest price while keeping it a fixed price, while promoting equality, and that is far more likely to happen than if you guys, if suppose they have access to your data and they can use it. And you talked about how stolen data is not in this debate. Well, on our side, even if data is like, if suppose we implement this with fixed prices, companies might still be able to steal data, yes, but they cannot use the data against you. They cannot use the data as a weapon. That's what we've been trying to say since the first speaker and the second speaker. So, moving on to the impacts, right? So how does this impact the company itself? So if the company decides to do fixed prices, first of all, they don't have to lower their prices like with student discounts. Sure, they might not have to lower it as much, but they also won't increase their prices significantly because of the fact that they need to compete with other brands, right? So they will keep it at a fixed price, but it'll be an average price. That is the most likely scenario that is going to happen. Whereas on your side, your best case is the fact that the companies will just will decrease the price for a lot of people for every, your best case doesn't have price decreasing for inelastic goods. And what we've talked about is the most vulnerable actors in this debate are the people who need the inelastic products, right? Not the people who need the elastic products. So that is why we win, because the inelastic products, our side will benefit them with the fixed prices, and that is why in our best case, those people will get the things that they need. If a sick person needs medicine, they can get it at a fixed price. They don't have to go and get it from a special company for a special price. They can just get it for a fixed price. Meanwhile, if you want to buy a laptop, you have more options. And if you want to book a flight, you know that you can afford that flight from the start. No matter what, if you need to be somewhere, you will be there. You don't see train tickets or ferry prices just increase like that, like flights. But the reason that flights increase is because of the fact that there's no alternatives. There's rarely any alternatives to flights, which is why we need it. And that is why I'm proud to propose.
impact that side affirmative tried to push to us is that they can change the price of inelastic goods. But I don't understand, how are they able to change the price? Never really proven by previous speakers. All that they tell us, because everyone now has different prices, therefore people could demand for the prices to be lower. They are suggesting something new. That means that they have to reimagine on how does it look like. We think that this is already available in the school. People can already demand that the prices of inelastic goods such as sugar, such as medicines, to all be lowered, for the prices to be lowered down, despite the existence of things like student loan. Because we're telling you that this is a tool in the toolbox. If this tool in the toolbox is still working, why should you have to change everything, especially if it is working efficiently? At that point in time, they don't really have a case because you can co-opt all of their benefits, all of the impact that are also available on our side of the house. But if you still believe their case, I'm going to tell you on why is their case especially untrue for 3 particular reasons. First thing that they say is that companies would not make it affordable. But firstly, why would company make it so unaffordable that people cannot buy it in the first place? Because if nobody could buy it, nobody would, therefore they don't have a customer. No companies would want to have non-customer at all. They always want to keep their prices reasonable so that some people will buy. Secondly, why companies would also make it affordable to begin with? First is because of competition. Because there are other companies who also sell the same things, therefore they want to make their prices better for more competitive prices. They want to make it cheaper so that they become the first choice for buyers. The only example that coming out from under their side of the house is flights. And it's so funny because flights are elastic to begin with, because there are other providers of flights. Like if you cannot go for Asia, you can just go for Malindo Air or Emirates or whatever. This means that you can already have a choice that happens at the school. But the point that we're telling you is that not personal pricing. It's not that the price changes from day to day or from a person to person. It's most likely that the price remains stable throughout the week. But the problem here is that sometimes you can use these student discounts in order for you to get all of these benefits that we have proven to you. This means that the cost of living is much lower out of the house. And if their case is about general price control and not personalized pricing, which is what we understand from the across 3 benches, we think that there are already laws against this. Things like ceiling price to control the price of insulins, FDA to control market shares to avoid monopolies, or domestic trade ministers to control price of necessities. Because inelastic necessities are already heavily regulated. If their case is about this, they cannot fly because they do not take into account all the systems and all the mechanisms that is already available in the school in order for you to avoid price gouging, especially towards the poor and the most vulnerable. Secondly, we think that people are especially smart. If they know that personalized pricing are a thing that the price will change depending on the geolocation of you are, you can use VPN whenever you order a flight ticket, because that means that your prices could be much lower if you order it in Malaysia as an example. Secondly, people would order based on the days. They know that the price of flight tickets on Wednesdays are much cheaper than if you order it on a weekend. That means that people can choose to do all of these things. All of these tips already exist and it's widely known. Everybody knows this. If people find that a price of a bandage is expensive in one store, they can just go to another. And it's not like personalized pricing means that when I go to a store, they will charge me $5 for it, and when Haikal goes to the store, they charge you $7 because they look thicker. It's not a thing. You can already buy bandages for the same price. That means that that case is not true at all. You can all buy bandages on the same price. In fact, we tell you that companies already have the incentive for them to set reasonable prices for 3 reasons. Firstly, for PR purposes. Them offering discounts for students already attract students to buy their particular technology. Secondly, to attract people to come into the restaurants to begin with because they offer much cheaper prices for students. Thirdly, because some companies are actually benevolent. You all guys have to also take that into consideration. That some companies are willing to cut their profit margin for some group of people. If that means that pregnant women or maybe some people or students or veterans can get cheaper prices because they are sustainable. And lastly, the biggest thing of it all, it is sustainable. That's why many companies do it. Because if their case is about price gouging, we think that price gouging is much more likely to happen to rich people. That means they will charge rich people more, people who are actually capable of buying things. If they're going to price gouge, especially to poor people, who would go to the restaurants, especially after all the backlash that they're going to receive? If nobody's actually going into their restaurants, this restaurant will not exist then. Let's do the weighing. First on data will be stolen, which is the worst case scenario that could happen in the hours of the house. But the problem is, they've never really solved this either. Because they've never told us why is it likely that this data would actually not be stolen and outside of the house. We think that data and cookies would still exist even if there is no personal pricing because of things like personalized ads to begin with. And even if we take their case and pass and that it happens a lot more under us, what is the harms of it? Never really proven under the outside of the house, because if price gouging or because data taken means that some people get charged much lower, but it's good at the end of the day. Because if you are poor and you get cheaper price, why is it this bad? And out of the house, even if data got stolen, some people will benefit. Even if there is a price hike for inelastic goods that is already options for everyone. People can just simply choose whatever that they want to buy. If rice is expensive in one store, they can just go to another. If whatever that they want to buy is expensive, you can just go to another. And they have never mentioned actually in where does this price gouging or wherever this thing actually happen a lot more. I don't think that we can read this debate under this metric. The first call out that I want to make under their house is that they are the ones who actually introduce the new thing. Therefore, they cannot provide the harms of the school. Current problems are already solved in the school. All of these problems already have their own solutions. Then introducing a new thing, they have to prove to us what is the uniqueness of this particular tool in order for you to solve all the problems in the school. We think that all the problems in the school is already solved by this particular tool. And secondly, let's look me in the eye and tell me that you do not enjoy student discounts, especially if you go to the movies, if you go to restaurants. You would enjoy those things. It's a small benefit that matters to people. Like even if you do not believe in all our big cases on how marginalized people are going to benefit, believe in the student cards that you have, the amount of discounts that you can get. Sure, it's a small amount, but still substantial amount. If I can get Froyo for a cheaper price, I would still abuse my student status. The third call out that I have is that there is also incentive for government to still fight for personalized pricing. Because we've already told you that this is a tool and toolbox, meaning to say it can be used for both government and the businesses. This means that governments can impose personalized pricing, especially for people with offense such as DUIs, with extreme addictions to cigarettes. Maybe not drugs, guys. Like drugs are not illegal. Drugs are not legal in the first place. This means that there's a barrier for people to access. Therefore, this is where all the harms and the impacts that Camela explained in her first speech already manifested. And in these metrics will be win the debate. Let's just go on to the trade-off. Like, sure, at best, price gouging will happen, but only happen to the rich. We don't mind, they can still pay. They're rich anyway. What do we explain our discount? Firstly, Apple is able to do this because, especially particularly students, because they want to do this. Sure, it might be some prices lower and only some people benefit because only some people buy their laptops or new laptops from Apple. But at least because some people can benefit from it, it's already a good reason for why you should not ban it. Especially because there is no substantial harm until to the point that we have to ban it, which is what they are suggesting. And if they are accusing us of only caring about Apple, within there's also other student brands such as Acer or Lenovo, whatever laptop you want to say. It's like this, guys. I don't have to mention all. The marketing points that they say is that, oh, companies only do this to gain marketing points. But here's the thing. If they are doing this for marketing, what is the harm of it? If that means that much more people will buy their products, what is the harm of these people trying to buy their products? But secondly, if this means that people can buy their products for cheaper, why is it something bad? If people can buy an Apple laptop, maybe for a 5% discount, which maybe does not matter to them because they're rich, but not for me because I think it's a substantial amount of money that I could save. I would get an Apple M2 MacBook. I think it's quite nice. This means that if a company wants to control all this pricing and just not offer it all, and it's impossible for them to do. Enjoy your non-personal pricing. I'm just going to go to Cambridge and enjoy cheap alcohol with my student card. Our case is not about students should be buying Apple product, but rather the benefits of having student discounts is one that benefits them. More importantly, about the discounts for like disabled people and also the veterans. Because these are the people who are the most vulnerable, who lacks the financial capacity to buy stuff and to be able to survive. They need to be able to have some cheaper prices. I want to first engage with F's best case scenario, because let's assume F is right. All companies for some reason will only price gouge rather than lower their price. Our first question would be, who can actually access it? Because obviously, if you decided to charge instead of like 50 USD for an insulin and charge it to 80 USD for an insulin, obviously the people who were paying at 50 USD are unlikely to be able to pay at 80 USD, which means that you are unlikely to get that 80 USD, but rather you get zero. Which means that they are more likely going to charge the people who have the capacity to pay, which means that these are more likely going to be the richer people, or at least the people who actually can give them money. That means that what's actually going to happen is that only the rich people are more likely going to be suffering from all this price gouge. We explain to you why exactly, even if the richer people are suffered from the price gouging, it's actually beneficial because at least it allows you to compensate all the losses that you made because of the fact that you need to make it cheaper for the poorer people in order for them to access it to begin with. Their case is about inelastic goods. I want to first point out that we engage with this in so many ways. Firstly is that we explain to you why exactly it won't change on that side of the house either. Because the reality is that the companies will overcharge it anyways. We already responded by explaining to you why exactly regulation also exists to actually prevent this price gouging to begin with. Which means that in terms of like the inelastic good, there's not much delta that happen on that side of the house either. The reality is that we explain to you how exactly the inelastic good will be more accessible on our side of the house when the companies are able to actually price gouge. The first reason is because, as I explained earlier, is to compensate the losses that they made because of the fact that they need to make it cheaper for the inelastic goods, cheaper for like the people who cannot access it, so they have to reduce it the price. They will price gouge it for the people who have the more money for it, which means that they're able to actually sustain their business far better. But secondly, I also want to know why exactly the company price gouge to begin with. It's because they needed the stability, because they do not want to actually lose out a lot of money when nobody actually like book their flight or actually go into their flight and they have to spend thousands on the fuel of like the flight itself. Which means that they will actually incentivize people to actually book earlier in order to prevent all of these things from happening. But more importantly, what if like the flight itself is very empty? So at least you're able to incentivize people to actually go for a flight. That means that you're able to maximize your profit as possible without actually wasting a lot of money because of this. This is very important because you're able to actually create a stability for the companies, because if not, the companies will lose out their businesses, or they have to charge much higher in order for them to be able to survive, because if not, they will lose out a lot of money like if they're not able to actually get as much customer as possible. The conclusion here is very simple. Even if it's price gouging, one that we have to defend, we explain to you why price gouging is fine, because at the very least we're able to make it more accessible to a lot of people, or at least making sure that the companies are able to sustain themselves. There's far better benefits. But we explain to you why exactly the price is going to be much cheaper for three key reasons. The first is the comparative advantage, because if companies have member price, student price, disabled price, you'll have a lot more people who are going to go to their company, to that specific business, which means that they're able to get as much consumer as possible. But secondly, it's because of the ESG and the reputation of saying that we love people to have access education. Thirdly, it's about how exactly we're able to increase consumer, because if you lower your price a bit to a point where people can actually access it, that means you're able to increase the amount of money that you get because you have more consumer. Why exactly that this is very beneficial? Because all these prices becoming cheaper means that we're able to access all of our benefits. We have two specific benefits. Number one, making stuff more accessible to a lot of people, especially for the most vulnerable, are the most important things, because that means that that's how they're able to actually sustain and also survive their life and uplift themselves in this problem. But second and more importantly, it reduces the burden on the government, because they no longer have to rely on the government's welfare, but rather they can actually pay for themselves, and that means that the government do not have to spend a lot of money on welfare, rather they can actually spend it on development. The conclusion here is very simple. If the price is lower, we win this debate. If the price goes higher, we also win this debate.
Poor finances, all these things are much more broad scale and long term and much easier to wring the life out of you compared to giving you a discount for the hope that you come back for a coupon the next morning. I think that the logic is pretty clear. Due to the fact that there's a wider variety of people that can possibly be affected on this, that there's very little regulation and pushback for companies to be able to do this, we think that these people are just running roughshod over our lives without thinking about it. I think that your cost mechanisms probably don't fall out of the water for all these reasons. So proud to you.
Hi everyone, thank you all very much for that debate. Obviously a bit tough to end Australs 2 days in a row with economics rounds, but teams did well in the debate despite that. I'm going to give general feedback, announce the result, go through the reasons for the result. So in terms of general feedback, I think the first thing in this debate was I wanted teams to get a lot more specific about real world examples of when personalised pricing is actually used. I think the two big examples that are probably missing from this debate are insurance, where insurance is assessed based on personal data for prices, etc. So people who live in more natural disaster prone areas to pay a lot more for home insurance, people who have medical histories pay a lot more for health insurance, and also inverse of that. And probably also things like Uber and Grab and ride sharing technology, I think all would also count as personalised pricing. There were some good examples in the debate about things like I think the student discounts, etc. But I think there could have been more explored in this debate, some more contentious stuff. And in the example, I think some of the other examples that were chosen around medicine or flights, I'm not necessarily sure how much they fit into personalised pricing quite as much. I think building off that then, I also want to think that both teams need to connect, I think, your harms or your points a lot more to personalised pricing as the mechanism for why they're occurring. So things like pricing, so things like student discounts at times or price gouging. How are these things not just also just normal parts of business? You can I forgot what I wanted to say on this point. But is it like just normal pricing structures also relate to things being more expensive or less expensive? Do companies will companies only price gouge in a system of variable pricing, etc., and not in a system that both systems as well? So give a bit more specific to exactly like this is the mechanism that results in the outcomes that you're talking about in the debate. And the last one is I think just a bit more, I guess, at the counterfactual need to be engaged a bit more earlier from both teams of just when we don't have personalised pricing anymore. What is the mechanism that companies use? Will prices go down? Will they go up? And why they will or won't go up or go down? And that I think actually leads a bit more back to the first piece of feedback. Is if we analyse a bit more about common scenarios that occur, things like insurance, premiums, etc., that I think will give you a hint as to why they occur in that instance, but also then help explain how they might act otherwise, where they might jack up everyone's price, or maybe they just restrict access to insurance, and then to ensure they can't offset their losses. Lots of scope there, I think, for things to explore a bit more. In terms of the results then, so obviously it was one chair, two trainees. It was a split across the trainees as well, but myself and one of the trainees both gave the debate side negative. Congratulations. So there was a split of I think the majority of the panel gave it side neg, thought it was a bit clearer. The minority panel gave it side AF, thought it was a much closer debate, and ultimately forwarded to AF. I will try in the next part of the adjudication point out where there was differentiation in the panel, but largely we'll go through the reasons why the majority thought that negative won the debate. So I think in my mind, I think there are probably two big elements of this debate, and then two smaller ones that I'll go through as well. So let's start with the two biggest ones. The first one I want to talk about, and I guess all of these grouped under impact on individuals. But anyway, on price gouging, I think Affirmative does a good job from the start of explaining what price gouging is, why it is particularly harmful, particularly for inelastic goods, things that people absolutely need to have, and it is bad when those things cost more for those particular groups. I then explain why companies are able to get away with it, difficulty of government regulation, etc. Government can't break up these companies in lots of cases because they're big or they're important. I think they also just give some important impacts there about why people with injuries or in needing insulin and things like that, it is important that prices are not gouged. So I think that part is good. I think there's a few responses and observations though that make it less impactful in the debate. The first one is just the underlying issue of will these prices get significantly lower as a consequence of abolishing personalised pricing. That's I think an observation I make right from the start, but I think it's more clearly pointed out for the negative team from second negative onwards. There's nothing to suggest that in lots of these cases the price won't just stay at a higher, more gouged level if it is already at that level in lots of these cases where people can't or already can't afford it. I guess the best response we get to this is this idea around, well, competition will exist. I think we need a lot more about competition as to why the prices will be driven down to meet the levels that Neg explains people need to have, and they get with their variable pricing for their stakeholders. But also, if they're already price gouging above and beyond what they need at the moment, it kind of suggests that they wouldn't do that from side Affirmative, because if personalised pricing is leading to everyone gouging and charging more, it's unclear why the absence of that wouldn't still have that same set of incentives to charge a lot more and restrict access to only those who can most afford it. I think negative also gives some additional stuff. So first negative is actually want more volume. So absent, so if you had personalised pricing, you're actually likely to see not a situation with more price gouging, but actually see a situation where you want to get more volume in, so you will lower those prices. So that I think is the first clear mechanism why they get lower prices for some things. I think second Affirmative does mitigate this to some extent with the idea of they want per capita profits, but I think ultimately Neg is more able to show that just the enticing people in, the getting more people to buy in the first place, and as well as the latter responses of just cross-subsidising those prices actually is okay to have more volume in, because some wealthier people with their personalised pricing pay more, so that lower income people can afford it more, and that ultimately ends up being the same anyway. So both on per capita and volume, I think Neg is able to win. I think second negative also points out that through the competition mechanisms also work on their side too, to some capacity for them to get lower prices too via competition. I think then the last stuff, what do I want to say here? I've dealt with the competition stuff. So I think at the end of this then, the biggest differentiation I think on this issue was, in the panel, was the belief that the absence of this mechanism would force down prices, and the competition mechanism worked a lot more for the minority of the panel, but the majority of the panel just didn't think this was fully enough explained. And then in terms of price gouging, negative show, they get less of it and they get better pricing on their side. Let's then look at the second question of the debate, that being about groups in need and who benefit specifically from this. I think what NEG does well here is identify a bunch of people who at the moment are the most beneficial as a result of this variable pricing, of the personalised pricing. I think it is reasonable for them to firstly to claim that this can apply to like classes of people, like students, people with disabilities, veterans, etc., and doesn't have to be necessarily on a person-by-person basis. I think NEG probably could have engaged a bit more on the person-by-person basis, looking at the examples earlier, but I don't think the response we get from AF that like, well, by a fiat, we will say the debate's about this. I don't think it applies in that way. I think NEG makes a reasonable claim this also fits under the definition and can also be discussed. So I think that is reasonable as part of the debate. I think then what NEG is able to do then is have some really good examples to explain why the lowering the prices here and really good impact is why that makes a big difference for these people. So having the personalised pricing that students access food for like necessity things, but also for non-necessity things like accessing movies or things like that too are also particularly useful for these individuals and having them. The couple response we get from AF here is that, well, there are other organisations obviously can provide that. Charities, NGOs, governments, etc., preferable in the long term. I guess there's a hanging question of how much capacity do those have versus individual businesses, because obviously the business has the capacity, as identified earlier, to cross-subsidise those losses on the lower prices, but it's unclear that governments or charities have the volume or capacity to do that on their side. And I think, as pointed out by Negative, that is a huge additional financial burden that's being placed on the government here that is unlikely to happen. There's a lot of stuff then about why these groups in need aren't actually being benefited by corporations, and this is another point I think was a point of difference on the panel, with the idea that corporations are actually acting pretty bad ways. So a lot of this is just done as a trap to get people in. So the $2,000 to the $1,800 Macintosh example, or the idea that corporations still want to like have poor incentives to market you in. They're a trap. They just use it for promotions, etc. I think that I think AF probably is reasonable to claim that a lot of these things aren't necessarily done in a purely altruistic way or a way that's purely meant to help people. Well, I think NEG is able to point out, like, okay, they aren't doing it in a nice way or for a good reason, but it is still having the ultimate consequence of helping those individuals. That's why it's still something we ought to support, even if it is just a marketing ploy. And to the extent, I think with the Macintosh example, that like there are other cheaper goods you can go out and buy, that's true, but it didn't seem like a student discount on a $1,000 laptop rather than $2,000 laptop wouldn't also still make a difference in that area too. So I think it still seems like a good idea that these discounts are able to occur. The last couple of things that I think are on smaller issues. The first one, something I forgot to say earlier, just on the flights example, I think also NEG has some good responses to explain why maybe in the flights example, like being able to pre-plan is really important. So it's good that you're able to offer lower prices earlier to pre-plan how much fuel and passengers you need in the long term to know what flights to offer. I think, again, I'm just dealing with an example here, but I think given that flights became such a big part of this debate, probably important to raise it. The two actual things I want to say at this point then, I think NEG has an interesting claim here. I don't think it quite works out, this idea around preventative access. So we will charge alcoholics more for alcohol and things like that. That seem to just be something that could be covered by a sin tax. I know the AF reply does mention sin taxes. Can't count as a response because it's a reply. But even just as a judge observing it, I was like, that seems like a sin tax issue more than a price gouging issue. I think the reason why this doesn't carry huge weight in the debate is a clear explanation of just, is that a thing that's happening at the moment? Do companies operate in this way? The other area was on data and privacy. I think this is the other big area where the panel differentiates in terms of how important this issue was and who ultimately wins the issue, with minority of the panel thinking this was a far stronger principal win for side affirmative, but the majority of the panel feeling it didn't work out. So on data and privacy, Affirmative makes the claim from the start that the way personalised pricing is done involves a lot of theft of data and taking data from social media, things you post like your age on Facebook or whatever, and that is how this thing is being informed, and that is bad. I think NEG has a series of very reasonable responses right from first here, that to the extent they can just like, for the worst excesses of illegal data collection, they can just model it out. They don't have to support things being taken like improperly or illegally. But secondly, there are alternative ways people access this data anyway to do personalised pricing. That being they use public information. I'm not entirely sure about the criminal records example of that, but I think the other two are just like they can request it, so like show your student card to get a free ticket, or they can make it part of your registration duty. So when you sign up for products, you give this data over willingly to attain those benefits. I think the other response they give as well is to say that there are lots of other reasons that companies do engage in the nefarious data behavior that AF talks about, things like advertising, etc., which means that probably this thing isn't stopped or significantly lessened by the change in the model AF talks about, so that harm is still likely to exist. On the flip side, the majority of the panel thought that it actually was significantly impacted by this model, and therefore was a benefit to stop it. So ultimately, then, that's how we came to the decision. I hope it all made sense. Very happy to chat